The bad news? Vampires live among us. The good news? They're just as bored as the rest of us, even though they can live forever. That's the concept behind What We Do in the Shadows, which has gone from unassuming short film to cult movie to successful TV show. Before What We Do in the Shadows arrived on TV, it was a movie that premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2014, but its origins go back even further than that. In 2005, New Zealand-based filmmakers Taika Waititi and Jemaine Clement wrote, directed, and played the main characters in a 27-minute mockumentary short film called What We Do in the Shadows: Interviews with Some Vampires. It didn't get much traction, so Waititi and Clement moved on to other projects. For Waititi, that meant directing the Oscar-nominated short film Two Cars, One Night, and the feature-length movies Eagle vs. Shark and Boy. He also directed a few episodes of Flight of the Conchords, the HBO show about a wannabe folk rock duo co-created by and co-starring Clement. About 4 years after they made the short, the duo got to work writing the feature version. It then took another 4 years after that to get the production off the ground. Editing proved to be the most time-consuming of all their tasks, as the film's 87-minute running time was the result of carefully winnowing down 125 hours of footage. The vampires of What We Do in the Shadows are not the typical brooding and frightening creatures of the night. They certainly try to be romantic and mysterious, but they just can't get the hang of it. Viago, as played by Waititi, is awfully cheery for someone who kills people, while Vladislav, as played by Clement, hides his pining for an old girlfriend by trying to be as dramatic as possible. Both actors pulled from various sources to flesh out their characters. Waititi based Viago's sunny and effervescent disposition on his own mother's personality. As for that silly way he speaks, that came from a stranger. As he told Empire magazine, "He's partly this guy I once met while I was traveling, a German guy who just had a very high-pitched voice. That man's name was Philip, but apparently he preferred to be called Mr. Happy." As for Vlad, Clement based him on a classic bloodsucker, none other than Count Dracula himself. Specifically, Gary Oldman's portrayal of the famous vampire in the 1992 film Bram Stoker's Dracula. Every work of vampire fiction has its own particular rules. There are certain tropes that show up frequently, such as how vampires don't appear in mirrors and can die if they're exposed to sun. When the creators of What We Do in the Shadows devised the rules for their universe, instead of making up a whole new mythos, they chose to adopt what was established by the great-granddaddy of them all, Bram Stoker's 1897 novel Dracula. So much vampire culture stems from that influential book, such as the creature's aversion to crucifixes. As Taika Waititi explained to Empire, "I think that era was where the rules came from, that they can transform into bats and so on. We've gone for the movie Dracula, Dracula." It's also important to note that What We Do in the Shadows takes place in a world where other prominent fictional vampires exist, and that sometimes influences the character's behavior. For example, in the TV show, Nandor buys glitter so that he may sparkle like Edward Cullen does in Twilight.
"I'm going to sprinkle it on my face and on my body, like Twilight."
And Nandor's familiar Guillermo speaks of his desire to become a vampire after watching Interview with a Vampire and becoming enamored of Antonio Banderas' character Armand. When Waititi and Clement adapted What We Do in the Shadows for TV, they switched the setting from New Zealand to Staten Island. This called for a cast of all new characters, including Colin Robinson, the franchise's first American vampire and its first energy vampire. This is a creature who feeds not on blood, but on the psychic and mental energy of others by boring them half to death with dull conversation. In 2019, Clement told The Hollywood Reporter, "It's a term I've heard used to describe people who are difficult to talk to, and I've definitely been cornered by these people at parties. Those people that you feel you need to be saved from, and the longer you're in the conversation, the more difficult it is to get away." It was just taking that to the supernatural level. Mark Proksch, the actor who plays Colin Robinson, improvises most of his torturous dronings. According to Clement, "A lot of it's not on the page, he can just do that endlessly. He's such a funny guy, but I do wonder how this is going to affect parties for him."
Now I just wait for the comments to come in. "Hey, can you mansplain any louder?" "Yeah, sure."
Both the film and TV versions of What We Do in the Shadows utilize the same catchy opening theme song. It's mildly spooky, and with its crisp, folk-influenced British invasion sound and relative obscurity, it would also feel at home on the soundtrack of a Wes Anderson movie. The song is called, appropriately enough, You're Dead. The film's editor, Tom Eagles, amassed a collection of tunes about death, and then he turned Waititi and Clement onto You're Dead. They eventually decided to use it to score the opening montage of old photographs and drawings. To get permission, the production team had to track down the woman who wrote and performed it in 1966, American folk artist Norma Tanega. The singer, who died in 2019, is a one-hit wonder in the US, but not for You're Dead. Her only charting song was the equally odd yet charming Walkin' My Cat Named Dog, which hit number 22 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1966. It took a while for What We Do in the Shadows to make its way to TV. The film was released in 2014, and although Taika Waititi and Jemaine Clement almost immediately entertained offers to turn it into a show, it didn't premiere on FX until March 2019. That's mostly because Waititi went on to become an in-demand filmmaker. He directed the 2017 Marvel Cinematic Universe entry Thor Ragnarok, and followed that up with the World War II comedy Jojo Rabbit. In short, he had a lot on his plate, and he could easily put off even thinking about making a TV version of What We Do in the Shadows, which he's admitted that he and Clement didn't really want to do. As he told Vulture in 2019, "We didn't mind the idea of it existing, but the idea of us doing it was just a lot of work. We don't like work." While he's an executive producer on the series and has directed a few episodes, he's mostly left it in Clement's hands. That wasn't exactly a surprising decision, as the pilot was ordered right when he was offered Thor. As he put it to Vulture, "I couldn't see any way that I could be totally involved in the show and the film, so I made Jemaine do it."
It was great for me to come in just as a director, and all the scripts are great. They're really, really funny. In fact, probably better that I didn't write on it.
With its 7th episode entitled The Trial, What We Do in the Shadows really stepped up its game. After the ancient vampire Baron dies on their watch, the main characters must go before a council of vampires, who are all played by actors who had previously portrayed bloodsuckers in other shows and movies. The guest stars included Buffy the Vampire Slayer's Paul Rubens, True Blood's Evan Rachel Wood, From Dusk Till Dawn's Danny Trejo, Only Lovers Left Alive's Tilda Swinton, and Blade himself, Wesley Snipes. Additionally, Jemaine Clement, Taika Waititi, and Jonathan Bruff all reprised their roles from the movie.
From all the continents gathered here together on Staten Island. On Staten Island.
Clement and Waititi were interested in having cameos on the show, but they couldn't figure out a reason to make it happen. That was until Clement remembered that he'd met Swinton at the South by Southwest Film Festival, when both were presenting their respective vampire movies. He recalled to Entertainment Weekly, "She said, do something where our vampire characters are together. I just locked that away in my brain." While the tribunal turned out great, there were some actors who couldn't make it. Kiefer Sutherland of The Lost Boys turned it down, while True Blood's Alexander Skarsgård was filming in Australia. Cate Blanchett also missed out. She reportedly really wanted to appear, until Waititi realized she'd been put on the list of fictional vampires by mistake, as she'd never actually played a bloodsucker. The long-form structure of TV's What We Do in the Shadows provides an opportunity for writers to really explore what daily life is like for an ageless being. And it turns out that the answer to that question is that it's boring and monotonous. With that in mind, the show's biggest influence is something other than supernatural horror. Showrunner Paul Simms explained this inspiration to The Hollywood Reporter. The Office was about the tedium of working in an office and nothing really ever changes, or when something changes, it quickly goes back to being tedious. In this show, it's sort of like take that and multiply it by hanging out with the same people for 200 years and being sick of each other. One of the main sources of comedy on What We Do in the Shadows is how pathetic it is that the vampires have completely squandered the gift of being granted an infinite time on Earth. As Simms put it, part of what's funny about the show is that these vampires had 200 years during which they could have done anything they wanted. They could have learned any language, written 1,000 books, become proficient in any musical instrument, and all they've really done is sat around and bickered with each other. While What We Do in the Shadows takes place on Staten Island, it actually films in Toronto. The sprawling abode where the vampire roommates live is something of a noted house of horrors, or at least the one where the first season was shot is. Before the show's production moved in, it was used to film the big screen version of Stephen King's It. The second season had to be shot in a different house, though, due to a last-minute production emergency. As Paul Simms recounted to The Hollywood Reporter, right before we got to Toronto to start shooting again, we were told we couldn't use the vampire house that we'd been using. That was our biggest production struggle. The crew ultimately had to build a new exterior to match the original house. And then they began to get ambitious, as they added on a larger topiary garden and a koi pond in the parking lot of the soundstage where interior scenes are shot. So it sounds like it all worked out in the end. In the sublimely silly Season 2 episode On the Run, Laszlo assumes a new identity while hiding in Pennsylvania as a regular human bartender named Jackie Daytona. He disguises himself with just a pair of jeans and a toothpick. He's trying to avoid Jim the Vampire, to whom he owes an old debt.
How did you know my name?
It's printed on your card very clearly.
Jim is played by Mark Hamill, who got the role because he's a huge What We Do in the Shadows fan. He enjoyed the movie, but didn't think the show would be great because Taika Waititi and Jemaine Clement weren't in it, but he found himself proven wrong. As he told Vulture, "I always get nervous about shows I like because I find something I really love and it gets canceled. So I tweeted about it several times, trying to get my followers to give it a try. Apparently, that's what put me on their radar, and the next thing I know, they asked me to come on their show. Hamill assumed that he would be given just a small role, a civil servant or a neighbor perhaps, but when he was offered Jim the Vampire, he flipped out with excitement. His guest appearance ultimately helped elevate the show's profile. On the Run even earned an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Writing for a Comedy Series, and the show itself got a nod for Outstanding Comedy Series. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.